Hello everybody. I'm going to just keep talking for a minute until if anybody wants to join, they can. We're going to go over brick stitch tonight and learn all about brick stitch because I believe it's a stitch that is underused. I come across a lot of people that don't know the stitch, so I thought I'd go live on a video and explore it and show some techniques with it. And tonight we're going to use lighter color beads, and hopefully you'll be able to see it better. I can already tell I can see it much better than the darker color beads that we used during the last live. So first we're going to cover flat brick stitch and increase and decrease with it, and then we're going to look at tubular brick stitch, and then we're going to look at circular brick stitch because they're different. Tubular and circular are different. So hopefully you can learn something. Hopefully there's some tips and tricks that I can show you that you've not seen before. So the beads that I'm using are it's not going to be a project or anything. It's just hopefully so you can see really good with it. And okay, now I can't start brick stitch without ladder stitch. So we're going to do ladder stitch first, and we're going to use these yellow matte finish beads to do a ladder stitch. So you pick up 2 beads. I am using 8O beads so that you can hopefully see them better. Push that up, and I made the workspace smaller, so hopefully you'll be able to see. So I picked up 2 beads, and I'm going to pull them down to where I have enough thread to bury them at a later time. Leave a tail to bury it, and then I'm going to tie a knot to make those 2 beads sit side by side to where both the holes are going in the same direction and they are sitting side by side. Okay, and then I'm going to pass up through one of them. Doesn't matter which one at this point. There's your tail. Okay, so that's your first 2 together. Then I'm going to pick up a bead. I'm going to pass through the bead that my thread is coming out of so that the needle goes in where the thread is coming out of so that it sits next to that previous bead. And then pass down the bead that you just put on. And just keep doing that. Pick up 1 bead, pass through the bead that the thread is coming out of, pass down, pull tight, pass through that bead you just put on. Okay, I'm going to do a couple more just so we have a good base to start with. You need that base to work off of it for brick stitch. Okay. And then what I like to do with ladder stitch is the beads kind of sit a little wonky. So I will go through the beads and tighten them up. So since you're coming out of the top, I'm going to go down through the top of the next bead and pull it tight. Up through the bottom of the next one, pull it tight. Down through the top, pull it tight. Up through the bottom, pull it tight. Down through the top, pull it tight. And you should pretty much be where your knot was, where you started. Okay? Now, to do brick stitch, it's fairly simple. The first one that you do, you're going to pick up 2 beads okay? And pass under the thread. You're not going to go through any beads. You're passing under the thread between the second and third bead. Just the thread. Just catch the thread and pull. And then you're going to pass up through the last bead put on and pull tight. Now the very first one you do, the beads always sit a little wonky. So I pass down through the first bead, pass up through the next bead, and you'll see that pulls them together so they sit straight. Okay? Again, I'm using dark thread with lighter beads, so hopefully you can see the thread path. The next one, you just pick up one bead. Pick up one bead. So the first one on your row, you pick up 2 beads. Then the second one, you pick up 1 bead. And you're going to pass underneath the thread between the next 2 beads, pull, and then pass back up through the bead you just put on and kind of pull it down. Okay? And you just continue in that fashion. Pick up 1 bead, pass underneath the thread between the next 2 beads, pull it down, pass up through that bead, and tighten. One more. Between the last 2 beads, okay? And go up. Now you see that naturally did a decrease. There's less on this row than there is on the first row. So that pretty much brick stitch will decrease naturally. Okay, but let's say that you want to keep it the same amount of beads, then you would pick up 1 bead and pass under the thread between the last 2 beads, just like you did with the last stitch. Pull, and then pass back up through that final bead that you just put on. Okay, that's how you decrease at the end. All right, now we're gonna, that's how you increase at the end. That's how you increase. Now we're gonna increase at the beginning. I'm gonna switch to these beads. So you pick up 2, because you always pick up 2 at your first one. And instead of passing underneath the thread between the second and the third bead, you're going to pass under the thread between the first and second bead. And then pass up through that last bead you just put on. And you can see it increased it at that point. Then you just do regular, like you normally would. Pick up a bead, pass your needle under the thread between the next 2 beads, and then pass up through the bead, tighten it. Okay, that's the basics of brick stitch. That's the basics of flat brick stitch. And if you want to decrease on this end, if you want to increase in the middle, you can do that. That's really easy. You just pass through the same one twice. Pass through the same one twice and go up. Okay. You're just doing 2 stitches in one. You don't normally do it that way because you usually increase and decrease at the end, but if you ever want to, there you go. That's how you do it. And to decrease at the end, you just go between the last 2 beads and don't do an end one right there. Okay, so that's pretty much flat brick stitch, increasing and decreasing. It's pretty simple. You can very easily use different size beads and different finishes and different colors to come up with a really cool pattern. A lot of one way to think about brick stitch is it's peyote turned on its side. If you look at it this way, it looks like peyote, but it's not. It's brick. Okay, so some peyote patterns you can actually do brick stitch, but I have found there's a couple patterns in brick stitch that if you try to do in peyote, they don't work. So sometimes they're not interchangeable, sometimes they are. So that is how you do flat brick. Pretty simple. I'm going to cut that off and we're going to do a tubular brick stitch. Okay, and you could easily just take your brick stitch and as long as you increased and decreased correctly, you can flip them around in a circle and then sew those together, and there's your tube if you want to. You just have to make sure that you do the increase and decrease properly. Okay, so that's one way to do tubular, and there would be your tube. But I'm going to show you how to do it without doing flat. Just start tubular from the beginning, and I'm going to again start with the ladder stitch. So bring your thread down, tie your two beads together. Okay, pass through one to get to the end, and you do your ladder stitch. You pick up one, pass through the last bead where the needle is going in the same direction as the thread that the thread's coming out of, pass through the bead you just put on, pick up a bead, pass through that previous bead the same way that the thread is going, pull tight, pass through that last bead you just put on. I'm going to do one more so that we have a 5 bead tube. Okay, pass down through. Now to connect the two, it's real simple. Just fold it, and since your thread's coming out of the bottom, you're going to go up from the bottom on the first bead that you put on and go down from the top just to connect those two. Okay, and then I like to go up one more time so that my tail is always on the bottom. And there you have a 5 bead tube. Okay, so you pick up 2 beads because you always start your new brick stitch row with 2 beads. Skip this first one because we're not going to increase, and go underneath the thread between the second and third bead. Pull tight, go back up, and pull tight. Okay, now that bead wants to kind of sit that way. That's when I personally go back down through the first bead and back up through the second bead, just because it connects those bottoms together and makes it sit nice and flat. Right, and you just keep doing your brick stitch. You pick up 1 bead, pass underneath the thread between the next 2 beads, pull tight, go back up through that bead you just put on and pull it tight. Do it again until you have 5 around. Go underneath the thread, pull tight, making sure it sits properly. Go up through that bead. Okay, and if you look, you only have 4 around, and you can kind of see where there's an empty hole right there. So that's where you would put 1 final bead. You will go under the thread, pull it tight, go back up, back up. Okay, pull it tight. Now all of these are connected except this final one. You can see the thread connects them all except this final one. So you want to go down that first bead and go back up the second bead. And that's kind of a step up to get you back in place. You want to connect that those final beads together, and you can start again. So we'll add yet another color. Pick up two, skip the first one, go through underneath the thread for the second and third bead, pass up through. Okay, again, my first ones I like to snug together. So I'll go down the first bead and up the second bead, turn my work, pick up a bead, pass underneath the thread of the next two beads, pull tight, pass up through the bead, pick up a bead, pass underneath the thread of the next two, pull tight, pass back up. Okay, and then pick up the final bead to fill in that hole, pass underneath the thread to catch it, go up that bead you just put on, go down that first bead to connect them together, and then pass up the second bead to position yourself to put on the next row. That's tubular brick stitch. Again, if you put it on its side, it kind of looks like peyote, but it is indeed tubular brick. All right. Now, if you wanted to increase, you could, not a problem. You do your two for your first, like you always do to start brick. You pick up two, and instead of skipping this first one and going between the second and third bead, you're going to pass under that first one. Okay, and then pass back up through that bead. That seems to be sitting together pretty good, so I don't need to smush them together. I'm going to pick up the next bead, go underneath the thread that sits between the next two beads, pull it tight, pass up through it, pick up one, go underneath the next thread, pull it tight, go back up through it. You see we have four, and we have one spot left because that's what it's used to doing, 5 beads in that row. So you would go under the thread and go back up your bead. Now we want to increase. There's a little tiny space, not much of a one, but a little tiny space right there. So we're going to pass underneath the same thread, catch the same thread as before, as that last stitch, okay, and pull tight, and that bead will pop in there. Go up underneath it, yeah, pull tight, go up, go in through the bottom, up to the top, push it in there, and then you can see that you now have 6 beads instead of 5. All right, but these two are not connected. You want to connect them. Pass down through that bead and up through the next one, and you have done an increase. And you can tell by looking at the side, there's one extra bead. It's a little bit bigger. Not much, but it is a little bit bigger. Okay, so you could gradually just keep increasing it and then go back down to decrease it. whatever you want to do. That's the beauty of brick stitch. Okay, we're going to cut that off. That is tubular brick stitch. So we had flat, we had tubular. Now we're going to do circular. Now I've chosen a big bead to do circular around. Really big, I think it's a venturine bead. And what you do is you go through your bead with your thread and needle and come around, and you're going to tie a knot with your thread sitting outside of that bead, because as it stands, we don't have anything to catch. You know, with brick stitch, you just saw you have to catch a thread. So here we're creating that thread so that we can catch it, but we need to put it on both sides. So we tie that knot, and then what I do is go back through the bead again with your needle so that you can pull that knot inside and hide it. Then you're going to go back through that same bead the same way so that you have thread sitting on either side of the bead so that you can do your brick stitch like that. Okay, now you pick up your 2 beads. Remember, we always start with 2 beads at the beginning of the brick stitch. Catch underneath the thread, pull tight, go up through that bead. I'm kind of doing it a little backwards here, and I apologize for that. Go up through the right hand side bead, see, and set it down. Again, you know, I like to connect those 2 together just so they sit properly. It would help if I go through the right way though, wouldn't it? So you go down, back up, and that connects it together and lets it sit right outside. Okay, so you pick up the next one like you normally would. Go under the thread, pull tight, go up through the bead. Okay, do the next one. Pull tight, go up through the bead. Now my thread, I've pushed it. It's not a big deal. Just push it back. It will eventually stay in place once you get everything together. Pick up a bead, go underneath your thread, pull. You're going to do that all the way around. Pick up a bead, pass underneath the thread, pass back up through the bead. Just keep going. Okay. Just keep going. Pick up a bead. Now we're at that hole. You're going to skip the hole, of course, and go underneath that next thread on the other side. And pull tight. Okay? Just keep going. Round and around and around you go. Now the thing with circular peyote or circular brick, you're going to go around this way, but as you increase your number of rows, you have to increase, oops, I picked up 2 beads, don't do that. You have to increase the number of beads in order for it to sit properly, because your circle is getting bigger as you go out. Okay, circle is getting bigger as you go out. So once you get to the next row, you're going to want to increase in order for them to stay to look good without having gaps, without it bunching, without it pulling into itself. Okay, just keep going. Back up. It helps if you don't lose it. Get the tail out of the way, and you can start seeing, I guess, a little sunshine going on here. Now you can see a huge difference in the size beads. That one's quite a bit taller than this one. I would normally weed that out and just use beads that are more consistent in size, because it will make a difference. Okay, now what do I do? Because there's a hole, there's no thread to catch. Well, yeah, there is. You pick up a bead and you catch the thread, that first thread on the first side, right underneath that first bead. You catch that thread, pull it, and go up underneath and into that bead from the bottom to the top. And there you go. Now, it doesn't want to sit right, so what we're going to do is go down this first bead, pull it, and go up that last bead to connect them together. And then they'll sit better. Now you're working in a circle. Okay? Definitely is going to need to increase to keep the right shape. It's not a problem. You just increase it. So let's do pink for the next row. Pick up 2. I'm going to put my thread, my needle, right underneath this one. Go ahead and start the increase right off the bat. Okay, and pull that tight. All right, I'm going to go down the bead on the left, go up the bead on the right to connect those 2 bottoms together so they sit properly. Okay, pick up 1 bead, go to the next, go underneath the thread between the next 2 beads on the previous row, pull tight, go up the bottom of the bead you just put on. You just keep doing that all the way around. And eventually you're going to see a huge, there's a bit of a gap right there to get to the next one. When you see that, that's a good place to put an increase. Now you don't want to increase too much if you want it smooth. You can always increase it to where it ruffles. It's not what I meant to do. I apologize. Let's fix my problem. I meant to pick up 1, not 2. Because when you increase brick stitch, you increase it 1 bead at a time. Once you get past that first row, when you're putting 2 beads on, you only put on 1 at a time. 1 at a time. Okay. So pick up 1, go underneath the thread, go back up through that bead. Okay, and there's easily room to add another one. So this is where you're going to increase, pick up a bead, go right back under that exact same thread that you were under in the previous stitch, and go up to increase. And you're going to have to do that a couple times here and there, going around, in order for it to sit smoothly. Okay, again, like I said, if you want it to ruffle, just keep increasing like every one, and it'll do a cute little ruffle. All right, now I want to show you something. You can, I love to put stitches together. And you can switch this. I think we're going to experiment here. You can switch this from brick stitch into a peyote around it, I believe. And we're going to try. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a cream color bead and a pink bead. And then I'm going to go down underneath. I'm going to go underneath my thread and catch it like I have been doing all night. Pull it tight. And see, that's going to put that cream colored bead up there. I'm going to pass up through the pink bead only. And it's going to sit a cream colored bead up there. I'm going to pick up a cream color bead, a pink bead. I'm going to go underneath the next. I heard a ding. Is somebody making a comment? Oh, hi, Mary. I didn't see comments again. I don't know why it's not letting me see comments, but hi, Mary. And Tara joined, and Mike. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so picked up a cream and a pink, and I'm just going to go back through that pink, and it's going to pop that cream up there. Okay. Pick up a cream, pick up a pink, pass through underneath the thread, between the next two beads, and let's pass through the pink. So that just gives you a little bit different pattern going around, makes it kind of cool. But if you're familiar with peyote stitch, let me do one more. Cream, pink, pass underneath the thread, and back up in the pink. Okay. Now, if you're familiar with peyote, you can pass through the cream color bead, pick up a cream color bead, pass through the next cream color bead, pick up a cream color bead, pass through the next cream color bead, and now you just switched from brick to peyote. Easy. With peyote, you would pick up a bead and pass through the one standing up. That's all the peyote is. I'm about to lose my thread on my needle. Pick up a bead. So there's the easy way to, if you want to incorporate multiple stitches in the same project, there you go. There it is. Okay. So that's brick stitch. I went through them pretty quick, but experiment with them. It's kind of cool to see what you can do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, of course, I did odd count peyote. Sorry. But it's kind of cool to see all the different things that you can do with brick. I love brick stitch. You can see all the different ways here. So flat, tubular, and circular. And we increased and decreased. So I hope you enjoyed seeing that. And I hope you were able to learn something new. If you have any questions, please don't ever hesitate to send me a message, email me, whichever you need. The email is easy, Sabrina, Sabrina, @kamamadesigns.com. Or you can just hit the message button here on our Facebook and it'll send me a message. Please check out the website. We've got a couple different patterns, couple different kits there. I'm going to try to go live every Wednesday night with something. I never know what. Hopefully I'll be able to come up with some bead-alongs that we can do together. Just so you know, I am going to redesign this one a little bit. I fell in love with this, but I don't like the thickness that I did here, so I'm going to redesign it where it's a little bit flat, and that is going to be one of our bead-alongs very soon. probably the first Wednesday in November will be this bead along. That'll give you time. Tomorrow I'll put up the different supplies you need. That'll give you time to get your supplies together. And it looks like tonight the image was a whole lot better. Last time we were fighting with bad weather, which didn't help much with the internet. But tonight it looks a whole lot better, and I can see these beads really well too. So even though they're darker, they're still showing up pretty good. So that'll be our bead along for November. I'll do a supply list so everybody knows. If you're on our mailing list, I'll do a supply list via email so that you can get that direct instead of having to go to Facebook. If you want to be on our email list, it's so simple. Just go to the website, www.kamamadesigns.com, and sign up. I believe there's a link right there on the homepage that you can sign up and get all of our newsletters that we send out. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully you learned something new about brick stitch, and you can explore and make some really cool things. All right, goodbye. See you next time. Oh, anybody have any questions? There you go. I could do that. We've got a couple people on here. If you have any questions, I'm seeing comments now. Hi, Kitty. It's good to see you. So I'm seeing things now. So if you have a question, just pop on there, ask me a question, say hey, anything. If not, then we'll just go ahead and end. I am working on some different earring patterns. This is one of them. So the darker beads really don't show up all that well. Let's try this. There. Hey, Kitty. Some earrings and different patterns. Hopefully we'll come up with some really cool different things that we can do. And let's see, I don't even know the date. Today is the 16th. So we've got 2 more Wednesdays. So next Wednesday I will cover a stitch, and the 30th I'll cover a stitch, probably do something Halloweenish because it's that time of year. And then the 6th of November we will start this bead along. That should give you plenty of time to get your supplies in order. I'll get the supply list out tomorrow. Sounds wonderful. I'm glad that you joined. I hope you watch it again, and invite all your friends to come and see what we're doing here at Kamama's Designs. Thank you. Have a good night.